Hi, this is John Rowell for the Rowell Report. Today is Tuesday, November 25th, 2025, and I just want to go through the negotiating tactics of the Trump administration. As you know, President Trump was a big real estate guy, and his good friend Steve Witkoff is another big real estate guy, and they have gone through grueling negotiating moments in their life, and they have dealt with people who are seemingly inflexible, and they found a way to move people off seemingly inflexible positions to get them to do what they want them to do. So they're applying similar principles to Russia, and so I'm going to go through some of these tactics that they are using. So basically, the whole purpose of this negotiation is to get Russia to move off of their goals of the special military operation. This has nothing to do with trying to find a median point between the two sides. This is to get the Russia to begin to discard the goals of the special military operation. So the first thing when you deal with someone who's inflexible in a real estate negotiation is to reframe the goal. So you try to understand what their goals are and then reframe it into a language which you can then use to move them away from the goals which they are holding on to very rigidly. So like the one of the first things that they did was they put out this document which was the 28 points, and then they leaked a narrative to the press that these 28 points were actually the Russian position that was stated to Steve Witkoff, and they just kind of used it verbatim. So first they create a starting point which is a false starting point. Supposedly this is the Russian starting point, and then they're going to allow this position to be slowly moved towards what would be perceived Ukrainian position. But of course the initial position isn't the Russian position. It's the reframing of the Russian position into language which can then be broken down into little bits and then reconstructed into what they want the final document to be. So anyway, like reframing the goal, you see in the initial 28 points they mentioned about reinserting Russia into the G8. Like, I think Vladimir Putin has been losing sleep at nighttime because he's not able to get together with his good friend Keir Starmer, with Macron, with the new Prime Minister of Japan, who of course has been very pro-Ukrainian, pro-European. So anyway, this is Vladimir Putin's chance to get back into the G8 and take his seat with the big boys. So, they're trying to reframe the goal. It's no longer holding on to the goals of special military operation. It's all these frills of being reinserted and accepted back into the international community. So, talking about removal of sanctions. They even throw in there the 600,000 troop level, as if that would be acceptable to the Russians. So there are some points in there, the 28 points, which are very close to the Russian position, and others which are seemingly the effort that the Russians made to be flexible and to move towards a median point. So this is one of the first strategies of trying to get someone off in an inflexible position when it comes to real estate is reframe the goal and get the individual to stop looking at the goals they have, but look at other goals which seem also worthy, but actually, when they take their eye off the main goals and they begin to allow the other side to whittle away on those, then now once they get forced off of that position, then they are disoriented. So here's another negotiating tactic: expand the pie before you divide it. So you're going to create multiple points, and so it seems like, and some of the key points for the Russians just become like one of the points in a bigger pie. You have a pie, and instead of 6 slices, now you have 20 slices. So if you take out 4 or 5 slices from the pie, which are the key sticking points for the Russians, then it seems like there's still a lot of the pie left. So it still seems like they're getting, 70% or 80% of what they originally want. But, it's kind of a bait and switch, so to speak, with expanding the pie and then reducing it, discarding the key points from the special military operation when it comes to territory, troop levels, neutrality status, the 4 regions, etc. So then another strategy to get someone off a fixed position when it's real estate negotiations is to create multiple options so that you don't get an initial negative to the fact that you didn't agree to their key points. So first, you create multiple options, and this creates a certain amount of disorientation, some confusion, so you see those negotiating tactics right away with the 28 points, and so I'm sure the Russians have seen that as well. But you can see that that President Trump sat down with Witkoff and said, okay, what are the best strategies you've ever had to get somebody off a rigid position where they're not going to move? How did you move them? So they went through all these different options that they could use. Okay, and then supposedly these supposed Russian dictated 28 points are then passed to the Ukrainians, and the Ukrainians are in shock. They're, wow, it's incredible. Our ally has betrayed us, has abandoned us. We must decide between our dignity and our ally. And so, and then they begin to think, well, maybe there's a possibility of an agreement. So this expectation builds that an agreement still is possible. And here come the EU countries to add additional confusion, to create more points. They want to water down the key Russian points from the special military operation and try to make them equal with points that aren't important, and then slowly to kind of fish out all the key points and just keep the unimportant points, to try to get the Russians to move away. So you can see the EU is also a part of this whole strategy. So it seems like, in all these meetings between the U.S. and the Allies, at some point they must have brought them up to speed on what they were going to do, what the strategy was. So you see, and then you have the Western media comes in, and they are given the narrative that these 28 points are of Russian origin, and that and that this is impossible. We can't agree to those, even though those aren't the Russian positions. And so you're trying to get the Western media to also create this momentum that kind of sweeps the Russians along out of their out of their special military operation goals, and then introduce objective standards, third-party legitimizers. So you can think China, India, the U.S. Was working to try to get China and India on its side and to support it, to convince Russia that it needed to stop the special military operation, that business would be so much better for them if they just stopped. They would be accepted back into the international community when everyone would be cheering and giving them big hugs and blah, blah, blah. So anyway, these objective standards, you can hear that now with the territorial integrity. The EU is the Ukrainian officials, and even somebody like Speaker Mike Johnson. They're all pushing these objective international standards of legitimizing what is right and what is wrong. So even though the U.S. Doesn't respect the territorial integrity of any country, suddenly it becomes like the be-all and end-all for not only Speaker Mike Johnson but also the EU. And of course we know their history in all parts of the world and how they have changed and rechanged and changed again. Borders whenever it suited them. We also know about the NATO bombing Serbia, for basically 90 days to try to separate Kosovo off from Serbia. We know about also what the European nations did to destroy Yugoslavia, what they did in Libya, what they did in Syria, what they did in Iraq, what they did in Afghanistan. So it's clear that these objective standards, which the EU, Ukraine, the US, Canada are all mentioning, it's irrelevant to them. They don't care about those standards. They only become important when it suits them. So, but you introduce now the objective standards. You try to paint Russia into a corner that, if you're not going to accept the territorial integrity of Ukraine, then you are outside legitimate rules-based order. So anyway, then you get Ukraine to work on the so-called 28 points from Russia and to come up with 19 points. Meanwhile, President Trump says that Russia is providing feedback to fine-tune the plan. So anyway, we have this plan which is advancing, supposedly with the feedback from both Russia and Ukraine. And President Trump announces a deal close with Zelensky and the fine-tuning. And now the end of this plan is, the peace plan, is President Trump will send Witkoff to Moscow to basically accept the deal, all time to coincide with the November 27th deadline. So you can see that that Russia, which apparently hasn't been presented with an official version of any of the peace deals, but was supposedly involved from the beginning and all along the way in the process, they're going to be seeing the actual final deal on President Putin's desk presented to him by Steve Witkoff. So why President Putin would receive Witkoff and even give this plan a basic legitimacy, I have no idea. But anyway, you can see how this whole plan went about from the start to what would be the conclusion of this plan, would be this deal, which probably was agreed upon even before this whole process started with the 28 points. And then it arrives to President Putin's desk, and now he feels pressured to agree with it, sign it, or at least to negotiate with it. So anyway, that is Trump's negotiating strategy, pulled from his years in real estate. And I just tried to summarize up this negotiating strategy in 8 points. First, give Russia the feeling that they feel included in the process. That was by stating initially that the 28 points was created primarily with the points given to Witkoff from the Russian representative. The second part of the strategy is to try to break the Russian resolve surrounding key goals of the special military operation, and that's done by expanding the pie, by trying to get the key goals to be equal or below the unimportant goals. So it's to try to push the key goals down in the level of priority. And 3, split the goals into multiple points and then break down each point. So there we go. It's kind of a watering down of the key goals, trying to separate them off into little points and then nitpick on each little one. And then when you put them back together, you've actually departed your key goal, and it's now your goal is more attuned to the U.S. or Ukraine position. The fourth point of this negotiating strategy is apply the sense of a deadline to apply negotiating pressure to Russia. So here is a totally fictitious deadline, November 27th, and it's all going to come to a head. The European nations have been involved. Ukraine has been involved. The U.S. has been involved. Whoever, Santa Claus, Father Time, whatever, they've all been involved. And then it comes to President Trump's desk, and now they want to apply the pressure of having some, made up deadline. So that is another part of the strategy. Fifth, give the appearance of appeasing both sides when only giving legitimacy to one. So basically the point was to try to restate the Russian goals in 28 points, and then trying to move from there to the Ukrainian position. So you started supposedly at the Russian position, and then you moved towards the Ukrainian position, and then they came from their rigid points and they met in the middle. So the idea of that you legitimize both sides, but really the only goal of this negotiating strategy is to get Russia off its key goals of the special military operation. The sixth strategy is bring in trusted third party like India and China to apply pressure, and also to try to bring in individuals who will reaffirm the international rules-based order and what Russia needs to do to get back into the international accepted order of things. So anyway, it's to give Russia the sense that they're not part of the international order, and that if they accept certain conditions, they can be accepted back in. And negotiating strategy 7, get the Russians to focus on the deal and not on the goals. So anyway, you get them to focus on the deal so much that the deal is more important, and the goals, the initial special military operation goals, become secondary. So now the goal is to try to make a deal before a certain date, to feel the pressure to make that deal. And so you see that is one of the strategies. And finally, redirection. So now we're getting all kinds of good cops. So we get Trump, we get Driscoll, we get Witkoff, we get all these individuals who are involved, and we get all these good cops reaffirming Russia. They tell Russia, President Putin or Sergei Lavrov or whoever, how much they're appreciated, how much they're loved, how much they want them to be a part of the international order, and what could happen in case they were to compromise on their goals. So all this that is going on now with the 28 points basically is based in a real estate strategy to try to get someone off a rigidly held position. And so they are taking those, the negotiating, real estate negotiating strategy principles and applying them to this situation. So somebody sat down and thought out this whole process, how it would work out, who would do what when, and to try to build momentum and to try to sweep Russia off of their positions and get them to sign an agreement with which they never had desired to sign in the first place, but felt obligated to because of the deadline, because of the international pressure, because they felt that they needed to do that for their partners like China, India, Brazil. So anyway, I think that this strategy is going to fail because the Russians know what is coming next. They know what what Witkoff is going to bring is going to be this document, which was supposedly involving the input from both the Ukrainians and the Russians, but really it is the Ukrainian position reconceptualized into language which would be more acceptable to Russia. So, and it throws in a few little things here and there, like, oh, we'll remove the sanctions, but just little by little, as you do baby steps, we will do sanction relief with baby steps. And so once they get Russia on that treadmill, they know that Russia will be stuck. So anyway, I see this strategy as being very adventurous, and you can see the background of Trump and Witkoff in real estate, but at the same time, Sergei Lavrov been gone around the block a few times in international negotiations and in diplomatic relations, and can spot these tactics from a mile away. So I don't think anyone in Russia is really convinced by this whole process. They may find it laughable, but anyway, you can see how all these different parts have collaborated. First you had Zelensky coming out with this, it's either our dignity or it's our ally. And then slowly they begin to soften their position. It's all, pre-orchestrated so that it moves through from point A to point B. And they think with that they can get Russia off their goals for the special military operation. So anyway, I don't think this is going to go anywhere. I think, President Putin has been president for over 20 years and has also been around, done a few things. I don't think there's any possibility that President Putin has any interest in sacrificing any of the goals from the special military operation just to make European countries or Ukraine or the United States or Canada or New Zealand or Australia or Japan or anyone else happy. So I think they know what's involved in what they are doing. And so I think this is all bound to fail. But you can see how hard Trump is working to try to, he takes things from different, he tried the Alaska strategy, which was wine and dine, and then they will be so happy to be accepted back into the international community that, of course, they will sign the dotted line. That didn't happen. So then they were going to have the meeting in Budapest, but President Trump already saw that his strategy wasn't going to work. So he said, nah, I'm not going to do that. Now I'm going to do plan B or plan C or plan D, whatever it is. I'm going to use a real estate negotiating strategy, and I'm going to see if I can get them off their rigid positions and get them to move towards the position of Ukraine, which is really the position of the U.S. because this is a U.S. proxy war against Russia. So anyway, I think it's bound to fail, but we will see, and I expect to see Witkoff and Moscow on the 27th or before. And maybe he'll show up on the 26th, and then they'll say, okay, we're going to work out the final details with the signing on the 27th. But anyway, I don't think Witkoff's going to get anywhere, but anyway, they've tried that strategy. When that fails, they'll come up with another one. So anyway, I thought I'd present my version of what I think they're doing. So if you got to this point and you like this video, please hit the like button, share, and subscribe. And if you have any comments, please do so below. If you see any other strategy that's at use, I'd like to know what you think, and I'd be happy to hear from you. So I will cut this video short now, and I hope you have a great day. Bye-bye.